All right. Welcome everyone to this free webinar. Welcome back to school for those who already started school. And if you have not yet, well, gonna be welcome pretty soon. We're going to talk today about preparing the world language class for the new year. And I like to do this because sometimes we are so busy getting ready with so much clerical stuff that we kind of forget important things that are key when we start our world language classes, because world language classes are unique, and we cannot start a world language class the same way you probably start a math class or a science class. So um, this is the idea, the agenda that we have for today. First, we're going to talk about designing for acquisition and not just performance. So we're going to talk a little bit about learning about the language or acquiring the language. Then we're going to talk about creating a safe and motivating environment. This is key because it's important that our students feel safe, seen, and successful. Then, number three, we're going to talk about backwards design. We usually give the lesson, practice the lesson, and then we either assess with a test or a quiz or an exam or a project. That's kind of like the regular, process. But when you start with backwards design, you start with the end in mind, and we're going to see the value in that. Then we're going to talk about building daily routines that matter. In language classes, the routine it's key. The routine help us consolidate language in the brain of our amazing students. It's the repetition, the routine. And then we're going to talk a little bit about assessment, but assessment more as a tool to learn rather than a tool to uh, find out what they don't know, because it's quite different. And it's important that we talk about those things too. In my mind, this is a very informal, quick webinar. We'll see if we can reach that. Okay, so let's get started. First, let's talk about designing for acquisition and not just performance. And each one of the things that I'm going to be telling you here are not things that I came up with. I have my own experience in the classroom, and I will probably share with you some of those experiences. But research wise, I'm always going to tell you who came up, with many of the things that I'm sharing here with you. So in this first part of the webinar, we're going to talk about Bill Van Patten, professor emeritus and former professor in California. Dr. Stephen Krashen, also from California. And we're going to talk a little bit about the American Council of Teaching Foreign Languages Proficiency Guidelines, because they help us understand where our students are in the process of acquiring the language when we talk about proficiency. Okay? So the first thing that we need to keep in mind are two key concepts. The first one is that there's a difference between learning about the language versus acquiring the language. And I have to confess that for a very long time, my classes were about learning about the language. How do I know that? Because I was talking the whole time about the language instead of using the language to communicate. And instead of helping my students use the language to communicate, I wanted them just to be perfect at grammar. So I was really good at that, and that made me feel so important, like a real professor, until someone opened my eyes. And one of those first people who opened my eyes is a teacher that you probably have heard about. If not, you should research a little bit, because he is really uh, good at what he does. His name is Ben Slavic. And there's a coincidence there that he's also from California. So, Ben Slavic. Ben Slavic wrote a book for teachers' discovery. This book is called The Big Book of CI. And in that book, he shows us how to work for proficiency and acquisition instead of working for, you know, learning about the language. Then Ben introduced me to this wonderful teacher who I worked with for a little bit, and her name is Tina Hargaden. And Tina from Portland, Oregon, an amazing teacher who sees teaching languages also in a different way. Um, Also wrote books, and she wrote books on her own and with Ben Slavic. So then I started learning about Stephen Krashen, about Bill Van Patten, and I wanted to research more and more. So let's keep in mind that when we talk about learning about the language, this only means explicitly studying grammar rules, verb charts, and vocabulary lists. That is learning about the language. Conjugation, everything is kind of like in isolation. But when we talk about acquisition, we talk about acquiring the language, which means developing the ability to understand and communicate naturally. So the acquisition is the process for which we acquire that ability to understand and communicate in a natural way. Almost, not the same, but almost native speakers. Okay? How do we do that? We can reach that acquisition through meaningful exposure and real use of the language, which is the most important thing. And when we say real use of the language, we're not talking about not making mistakes. I'm not saying perfect use of the language. In fact, real use of the language includes making mistakes. We, as native speakers of our native language, we still make mistakes. So that's part of the game. So let's keep in mind, my friends, that we do not learn languages by practicing speaking. We acquire them when we understand what we hear and read. And I didn't say that. That was Dr. Stephen Krashen who said that. I'm going to repeat that. We do not learn languages by practicing speaking. In other words, when we ask the students to perform conversations in front of us, and we think that they are learning the language because they are performing a conversation in the target language in front of us, we're not taking them there, because it's not about learning the language, it's about acquiring the language. And we acquire languages when we understand what we hear and read. So this is key because this kind of like switches the role of the teacher. And I know that some very important professors doesn't like this and they don't like to be called facilitators, but I still believe that the best language teacher is a good facilitator. Facilitator. Fácil en español means easy. Facilitator, make it easy for the students. So the idea, my friends, we're going to talk about starting the school year. The idea here is let's try to avoid starting the school year with grammar packets and vocabulary drills. Instead, Let's prioritize comprehensible input, CI, languages students can understand from day one. And be careful, because some of you might teach the advanced classes, and we think immediately, okay, these kids are at a level that they should understand what I'm going to start saying my first class. But in reality, many of them have been so disconnected with the language, they have been disconnected from language since May, that it's hard to start reconnecting again. So if we make them feel like they are not understanding anything that we are saying from class one, we're losing them right away. We need to make sure that they understand what we are saying. And again, how do we do that? Through meaningful exposure and real use of the language. And when we teach in the United States, it's easier. We have it easier because there are many cognates in both languages where we can make ourselves understood by our students. Okay? All right. So let's keep working here. What are the goals for the first week or the first month? First, provide a rich and compelling, comprehensible input. That word compelling is key for Dr. Crashing. Compelling means that it's so interesting that the students really cannot say no. They get connected right away. Something compelling. So let's start thinking, what is compelling for our students? And it's different for you, for you, for you, for you, and for me. Because we teach in different contexts, because we teach different students, because every student has their own experiences. But we know our students, or we know our context, more or less, unless you are a new teacher. If you're a new teacher, you need to start working with things that really excite you, that are really interesting and compelling to you, so you can transmit that energy to your students. But if you have been in that community, working with that community for more than 2, 3 years, you know that community really well, and you know what excites them. So it's important to provide that rich and compelling input from the beginning. Another goal, establish high frequency structures and classroom expressions right away. We're going to choose classroom expressions that we're going to constantly be using, especially in those levels, novice low, novice mid, novice high. So they get used to those things. Yes, yes. Things like, for example, necesito usar la computadora. Do I need to use the computer? Are we going to read? Are we going to have homework? All of those things in the target language right away, and high frequency structures, grammar wise. And we're going from the beginning to start prioritizing listening and reading before requiring speaking and writing. You speak well because you have listened a lot, and you write well because you have read a lot. It's not the opposite. And for many years, we have been doing the opposite. We have been asking our students from years ago to start speaking from first week one. Talk about cómo estás, muy bien, y tú muy bien, gracias. Oh my gosh, wonderful, wonderful. They speak Spanish only with 1 week, or writing. And then we publish in Facebook group. My Spanish 1 students wrote this after the second week of class. And we're supposed to. Oh, it's about listening and it's about reading. Listening and reading. And remember, it's not me. Ojeda doesn't matter. Dr. Crashing. Most of this is Dr. Crashing. Then the other ones work around it. Okay? And very important too, and I know you have heard about this, is lowering the affective filter. In other words, we need to create community in our classroom, which creating community only means that we're going to work with our students in a way that they feel important and they see us important as well. There is reciprocity, and reciprocity. I don't know how to say that word, but back and forth. Okay, so that's very important. Creating community allows us to lower the affective filter, and we're gonna work on that for the first week, for the first month. So look at those, five or four statements here that are very important. Okay, my friends. So, strategies. Start with simple, compelling, comprehensible input routines. So, I have created for you a document that I'm going to share in the chat. So, designing for acquisition, daily routines using comprehensible input. So, I have put examples in French and in Spanish. So daily routines rooted in comprehensible input are the foundation for language acquisition. So these routines are predictable, low pressure, and full of meaning, helping students build confidence and fluency from day one. Yeah, we're gonna help them, starting very easy with the language. So we're gonna go with greetings, feelings, and emotions. What is the goal? Create daily opportunities for students to express how they feel using high frequency phrases. ¿Cómo estás hoy? Estoy feliz, estoy cansado, estoy emocionado, nervioso. Oh, vamos a ver en francés, señor Ojeda. ¿Cómo tu te sens aujourd'hui? Wow, creo que sonó bien, ¿verdad? Je suis content, fatigué, I don't know, and nerveux. No sé. Pero está the example in French as well. So there's some supports there like emojis, feeling charts, sentence starters. Okay. We have more strategies, calendar and weather talk, mini stories with repetitions and visuals, and you have examples there. Movie talk or picture talk, and you have examples there. Simple, compelling written CI style. So, readings that have been written specifically to be understood easily. And then, a very important tool that I'm going to be including in every document that I'm going to share today, a reflection tool. So, did I begin the year with comprehension focused activities, not production? Did you? Did you? Did I use visuals, gestures, or other supports to convey meaning? Did you? Did you? Did I repeat high frequency structures in context, not through isolated drills? Did you? Did you? And so on. And that reflection should help you seeing yourself where you are at. So I'm going to share in the chat right now, chat grupo de la reunión, okay, the link to that document. In the chat, my friends, I will really, really appreciate it if you tell me how is this going for you right now, what we just talked about. How is it going? Tell me in the chat. Should we keep going or should we just finish the webinar here? Okay, tell me. Ah, someone said it's going, kind of like, this information is great. Thank you. All right. All right. What else? What else? Are we reflecting on our daily, day-to-day work? Someone said that they really like it. Keep going. It's a good start, a fresh new school year. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. So let's keep going. All right. Number 2, creating a safe and motivating environment. Number 2, creating a safe and motivated environment. So again, here on the top, I'm telling you where I got this information from. And we're going to talk about motivation and self-determination. Okay? So, why is a safe environment crucial, so important in a world language classroom? Well, students must feel safe, seen, and successful. Safe, seen, and successful. When I talk about community building community, community engagement, I mentioned the word seen. They need to be seen, okay? And I do something that could sound a little stupid, but it has made quite a difference in my classroom, especially with the groups of students that I don't know. So I teach level 4 and I teach APs, language and literature. So the kids who come to Spanish 4, they don't know me. So what we do is that they need to uh, come to the front of the class, say their name, say their favorite food and how they want to be called, and then we shake hands. If you don't want to shake hands, at least do the fist bump, okay? But shaking hands, and they felt kind of like a little weird, especially the first 2, 3 students who did it. They felt a little weird, but they felt seen just with that little action. So I invite you that instead of just telling the students, hey guys, I'm your new teacher and I love you already, just fist bump or shake hands and listen a little bit about themselves. Obviously, depending on the proficiency level, what you're going to be asking them, okay? Something that they can share right away. It doesn't always have to be, how was your summer? Do you have a great summer? Did you have a great summer? Because we know how that goes. Not, we don't always have a great summer. Summers can be difficult for many of our students. So remember, students must feel safe, seen, and successful. We took care of the successful part when we talk and we talk to them using CI, comprehensible input. They already feel successful. Gosh, I'm learning in this class, and they will tell you, Senor, I have learned more in 2 days in this class, more than I learned last year, the whole year. It's not true. It's not that they learn more. It's that they understood you more because you use all those tools that we presented in the first section. Okay? So students need to feel safe, seen, and successful in order to take the necessary risks to acquire the language, because acquiring language is intimidating. It's not easy. When I came to this country 26, 27 years ago, and one day, my wife left and I was by myself in the apartment. And suddenly, number one, I didn't answer the phone. At that time, we had landline. I never answered the phone. And one day, the bell rang. I'm like, oh my gosh. I start sweating. Okay. And it was a policeman. I opened the door and it was a policeman. I was like, okay, police is great, right? At that moment, I have not seen yet all those videos that you see on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram about police being abusive. I said, no, police is good. Okay, hi, see? And he starts talking. I couldn't understand anything. I was a little nervous. All I understand was money, money, money. I'm like, okay, he's asking me for money, and there was a $10 bill on the table, and I gave him the $10 bill, and I didn't know why I gave him the $10 bill. I just wanted him to leave because I was under a lot of stress. Acquiring language, it's not easy. It creates anxiety. It creates fear, fear of making mistakes. And when you fear making mistakes, you're the barriers to communication are built. So it's very important that we create an environment that is crucial and important for world languages. Okay? All right. So students need to feel safe, seen, and successful. And according to Daniel Pink, this author who wrote this awesome book about motivation that we all know, right? He says there are three important pillars when we talk about motivation. The first one is autonomy. It's important that our students feel autonomous. Translation for us teachers, we need to give them different opportunities to learn in different ways. We need to give them choices. When they are able to choose how to learn, they feel autonomous, and that is one of the pillars for motivation. Competence. They need to feel that what they are doing, it's important, that they are learning. There is nothing less motivating that student that keeps going to the same class and feels like they are not learning anything. And then they tell us, well, how am I going to learn Spanish if I don't even learn well English? How am I going to read in Spanish if I don't read well in English or write in Spanish? And you know the drill. Okay. So these three pillars mentioned by Daniel Pink are things that we need also to take in mind when we prepare our classes for the new year. So icebreakers, classroom jobs are very important. Let's just I'm in the document. I have some classroom jobs that you can assign your students, and routines. And remember that routines are key as well. Okay, so what are the goals for the first week when we talk about motivation and self-determination? Create routines and rituals that normalize mistakes and celebrate effort. Build community through shared goals and mutual support. Help students see themselves as capable language users from the start. The moment they feel like losers, I'm not going to learn anything in this class, you lost them. And it's going to be hard for you and especially for them. And lay the foundation for long term intrinsic motivation. So, in this document, use student interest inventories to personalize content that I'm going to share with you. We see some important things. So, I'm going to just, okay. So, goal, understand your students' interests, backgrounds, and goals to shape relevant and inclusive content. How to implement Spanish sample questions. ¿Qué te gusta hacer en tu tiempo libre? Questions in French. Class constitution, the we statements, co-create classroom norms that build community, promoting risk-taking and empowering students. How to do it? If you want to do it in the target language, the icebreakers, build a sense of belonging and comfort through fun, low-stress interaction. Find someone who, and you prepare a grid, ¿ok? Tiene una mascota, le gusta bailar, puede cocinar, viajó el verano pasado. Don't wait for a specific topic to do this kind of activities. Do it right away, ¿ok? If you need to do it in English, that's fine. You're just building community here. Another icebreaker, name plus gesture circle. Empower classroom with jobs. Look at the jobs here. The greeter, calendar leader, tech helper, vibes checker, and you can come up with so many classroom jobs. Teacher reflection, my friends. Have I intentionally created low stress, student friendly routines? Do students feel that their voice and identity matter in my class? Have I addressed all three pillars of motivation: autonomy, competence, and relatedness? Okay, so I'm going to share with you this document so you can take a look um, at a later time, and I'm going to put it in the chat. Okay. Okay. Chat grupo de la reunión. Okay. I put it there. So here we go. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, my friends. So let's go back to the presentation and we go with number 3. Backward design with purpose. Okay. So when we talk about backward design, we're talking about the end in mind. Okay. We need to talk and think about proficiency goals and real world tasks, not just things that are artificial and that only will happen in the classroom. But why backward design? Um, as I said at the beginning, we usually plan forward. We choose a topic, we teach the content, and we give a test. Backward design flips that idea or that process that we usually follow in the classroom. We start with what students should be able to do. Okay, think about the first unit. What should they be able to do during the first unit? Okay, and then we plan how we can get them there, but with that end in mind. Okay, start with the end in mind. So, for example, what real world tasks should students be able to do in Spanish or in French or the language that they're learning? What input and practice will help them achieve that? Things that we need to keep in mind. So, it's important to always choose themes and topics that are authentic and relevant and context that they are familiar with. They're going to perform better. And we need to align those activities with the modes of communication. You know them? Interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. Always move among those modes of communication. Sometimes when we think about what we have been doing in the class, we realize that we're doing too much of one of those modes. And in order for their brain to move and work better, it's important that they start working with the three all the time. So what are the goals for the first units when we talk about backwards design? We're going to establish proficiency goals tied to the can-do statements. Remember that the American Council of Teaching Foreign Languages has a list of can-do statements divided by proficiency levels. So look at those can-do statements and see how they connect with your unit, because the can-do statements are telling you what is the goal. That's very important. It's a proficiency goal. You're going to select authentic and culturally relevant themes. Make the connection with culture right away. You're going to design activities that support the three modes of communication and also give importance to the listening and the reading, as we explained at the beginning. The interpretive is referring to listening and reading, interpersonal conversations, and presentational writing and speaking to an audience. Let's make sure that we include all of these choices. At the end, they are opportunities for the students to show that they're learning the language or acquiring the language, and to show that in different ways. That's all it is. Okay. So again, plan can-do outcomes for each unit based on the actual can-do statements. So how do we do that? Okay, using the actual can-do statements, here are the modes. Okay, for example, listen to a peer or video describing a daily schedule. Interpersonal, conduct a partner interview about morning habits. Presentational, create and present a simple personal routine. There are some examples in Spanish, some example in French as well. Choose a theme that matters. So here's the process for the whole thing. Align tasks to the three communication modes. And I know that this is a little more difficult to plan than we're used to, but the end result is just amazing, because this is targeting acquisition. So once again, I invite you to take a look at that document. For more information, I'm gonna put it in the chat. And if you cannot see the chat, don't worry, because I'm going to be sending the recording and also the documents of this presentation to those who register um, for this webinar. Okay? All right, my friends. So let's keep moving. All right, it's 5:43. It should be done right away. 4, building daily routines that matter. So when we talk about daily routines, so why are routines so essential in our language classroom? Uh, how do we acquire language? We acquire language gradually through repeated exposure, through meaningful use. So this is what happens when you are in an immersion context. You are exposed to repetition and you are trying to use the language with a meaningful goal. You want something, you want to accomplish something, you want to buy something, you want to say something, you want to demonstrate something. So it's important that in those daily routines, we keep that in mind, okay? Important. Structured interaction through repetition and meaningful use is key from day one. Also, daily routines create predictable, low stress spaces for students to absorb the language in a very natural way. Okay? So, consistently fosters fluency through warm ups, input, interaction, reflection, doing a 10-minute daily CI practice through songs, stories, or mini conversations. Spiral review, recycling vocabulary and structures for long-term retention. Okay? So what are the goals for the daily routines? Provide daily exposure to high-frequency vocabulary and structures. Build comfort with familiar chunks of language through repetition. In other words, let's go slow, my friends. In language learning, teaching better, less is more. When we expose our students to X vocabulary for 1 week, and we think, okay, well, they can take the quiz. And the following week, we forget about that vocabulary and we expose them to a different vocabulary, we're not helping them. And important, when we talk about chunking the language, okay? So familiar chunks of language and use them in repeatedly ways, okay? But make sure to ensure the interaction through using the language, not just making sure that they are understanding what you're saying. So in short, my friends, for this part, consistency equals confidence. Confidence in language learning means communication. Again, consistency equals confidence. Confidence in language learning means communication, which is the goal that we have. Okay? So, types of routines. What types of routines do we have here? So, mini conversations, song of the week, storytelling, clip chat, meme news talk, spiral review for long-term retention, examples there, language ladders, conversation wheels, classroom jobs, and exit tickets. So another document that I know you're going to find useful. All right. Para el grupo de la reunión, here we go. Okay. All right. All right, my friends. So let's finish here. We're going to finish with number 5. And number 5 is assessment. Assessment as feedback for growth. So when we talk about assessment, we need to keep in mind that the most important thing is to make a shift from grading to guiding. The beginning of the webinar, I told you, let's make the shift from teaching to facilitating. Now, when we talk about assessment, let's make the shift from grading to guiding. It totally changes the way we think or we approach things. Because traditional grading often measures what the students can't do. You give them the exam and they, okay, where did I make mistakes? Was something that I cannot do. But language acquisition, my friends, is a process. And it's a process where the timely and formative feedback is more powerful than a final score. The goal is not perfection, the goal is progress. So we need to look at assessment in a different way. Okay? So focus on feedback over scores. Use simple rubrics. That's something that I stress a lot, using simple rubrics, because I have seen many classes where I understand that the teacher wants the student to know how the student is graded, but rubrics that are too complex are overwhelming and really don't say much to our students. Okay? So what are the goals? Now this is for week 2-4 because we're talking about assessment. Introduce low stakes performance tasks to reduce anxiety. Help students reflect of what they can do and set goals. Use formative tools, rubrics, self-checks, peer support, and begin modeling how to self-assess based on real-world communication, not tests like perfection. Okay, so there's another document that is called Start with Low Stakes Performance Tasks in Weeks 2-4. So I'm going to share it right away here in the chat. Okay, there you go. And that's for you. Okay. All right, my friends. So this is it. I hope that you get some motivation, some material to reflect on what we do and how we do things in our classroom. I try for my presentations to be a little more than just information, but connecting what others have researched about with our daily life as teachers. I thank you very much for being here today. My name is Diego Ojeda. You can find me on Instagram at SR, which is short for Señor, underscore Ojeda. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I'm going to stop the